great people like Mary Baraka, Gary Neal, and many others who did great work. And we want to make sure that first their work is preserved. You know, we have to preserve this type of work. And it feels like it's a black arts renaissance taking place, especially in this city. In fact, you know, there's an upcoming mayoral debate, and it's strictly about the arts. That shows you how important the arts is. The arts does change things, social change, social conditioning. This is a beautiful thing when you talk about the arts. So with this conversation and this dialogue, we want to make sure that we continue this dialogue. We want you to leave here inspired, and also leaving here thinking about how we can, make sure that this black arts movement stays relevant, that it's not co-opted, and that it is something that we can use to change the conditions of the people.
But can you talk to us a little bit about, do you see a connection between the original black arts movement that Mr. Richard Raw talked about earlier, of the 1960s and 70s, and currently today? Is there a connection, or are we on two different paths at this point?
They're extremely different, and I think that part of the reason they're different is because media is different. So as Dr. Payne pointed out, I've done a lot of research on the Black Panther artist Emory Douglas, and in the 1960s, posters and tabloid newspapers were a huge part of getting the word out to people and using images to tell stories. Now we have social media, now we have the internet. There are just so many different media. One of the things that I was thinking about in terms of the original black arts movement is, and panelists, feel free to disagree with me or correct me or add to this, but it was not a primarily visual movement. It was primarily, it was interdisciplinary for sure, but primarily literary, and performing arts, theater, dance, poetry, writing, etc. And I think that we have in that way we have a parallel situation now, because the arts, the visual arts, are probably the least accessible of the arts. And one of the things that I think that's going on that's really wonderful is that in contemporary times, people are always thinking of ways to bring art more directly to people. And I think that all the current work right now around social practice and community-based art is really doing a fantastic job of that, which is, I think, where the original black arts movement probably didn't do as much as they would have liked. Although the Black Panther Party was very active in a lot of communities, and they did bring their art out. But up until recently, the main vehicle for community engaged art has been, I would say the most visible and accessible medium has been murals. And now we're thinking beyond the mural. People are thinking of ways to bring art to people that is inspiring and that can actually be an agent of change that is outside of that small box.
Has there been a permanent kind of split, if you will, from your perspective in terms of this black arts movement?
I think social media has been definitely a very integral tool into spreading the word, getting out there and getting it to people that normally would not see it. Dare say we have people that follow probably all of us and people in the crowd that don't even live in this country. We're now aware of different things that have happened, where things that are happening in the States, and against it, and then starting their own movements based off of things that are happening and atrocities that are happening to them. So I definitely think it's coming around. I think because social media can't be controlled, it's not really owned by anyone. It's free to everyone. If you have a internet connection, you have a way to get your message out. So like I said, I definitely think the split is not there, but I just think the way you get it out is different versus how it was in the past.
All right, so it's the old versus the new. Are we on two different paths, or are we actually continuing a legacy with the black arts movement?
That social media is bringing in young people like never before, and I think that might be one of the big differences, in the sense that you have the older folks actually listening to the younger folks as it relates to what they're going through, as it relates to the black struggle in the U.S. So I think, in a way, it's different, as they both said, because the media is different. But I think one of the main things is the fostering of young people's voices and perspectives.
You know, our people, well, first off, when you winning, everybody can agree. But when you losing, it's dissension, it's argument. You know, we're losing, all right? And then we believe deeply in everything that we do. We believe deeply in afros, and we believe deeply in weaves, right? So, when you have somebody who don't respect what the next person deeply believes in, that's room for argument, that's room for disaster, and you're already on the losing team. So, you're arguing because you're losing and because you disagree. And 9 times out of 10, that keeps us stifled off from each other, that keeps us not being able to make amends and handle business. So I think, you know, it's deeper. You know, we got a lot of healing that we got to do, but hopefully the people who are here, the people in this room, and the people, you know, attached to brothers like Richard Raw and Shy, and, you know, that know better. We can do what we can do to make as many friends as possible and put ourselves in a position where so-and-so is going to be so-and-so friend because they got to be my friend and they need XYZ thing to happen. And then the better we work on ourselves and make ourselves the best people we can be and create the best networks, we can get more people to work together and get people to do different things. And it's happening. You know, this brother, what he just talked about, that's 4 people, but pretty soon, because he got the ideal, because they did it, it might turn to be 8, 16, 14, but it's going to grow and it's going to take time. You know, no civilizations was built overnight.
Well, people do art for a lot of different reasons. I can only say for myself, I started my career as a graphic designer because I thought that is a way to influence media and culture, and I still believe that. And we still have there are very few black graphic designers or graphic designers of color, period, but that's another issue. As part of that, I will say that Emory Douglas won the AIGA, which is the American Institute of Graphic Arts, the biggest graphic design professional organization in the country. He became the 2nd African American to win that award in 2015. And he won it for his work on the Black Panther newspaper, which is remarkable on so many different levels. But anyway, getting back to, for myself, I don't see any reason to do art that isn't about drawing attention to something in the world that needs to be changed. And I don't think of it as activism per se, and you know, we here on the panel have different ideas of what activism is, but I like to think of it as awareness raising, consciousness raising, trying to get people to think about something a little bit differently. Now there are people who do, the kind of work I do is what people call political. And there are some people who don't do political work. Their work is more about aesthetics or whatever. I think you should do whatever you want. But I think that usually if you are not sincere about what you're doing and authentic, that will show.
I thought it was excellent. I really enjoyed hearing from especially the young men in Brooklyn. No offense to Colette. I thought she was great too. I think a lot of this is generational, and it just hurts me sometimes when I see us duplicating things that we did 20 years ago, 40 years. It's like, are we ever going to do something that is going to be sustainable? So I hope I expressed that well. I thought this was really good, and I've come to learn that people only know what they've experienced, and they don't study or have been taught, and it's not their fault, what happened before them. So I just don't want us to keep repeating, because people who are in power know that we're repeating the same request from 30 years ago.
I'm glad that we have an opportunity to have the discussion. I'm glad that there were a group of artists of color and people who care about artists of color in the room, because I don't think we have enough opportunities to see each other and just talk with one another outside of doing the work. Like, we see each other when we're doing the work, but we need to see each other when we're not doing the work so we can talk about how we can do the work together. So I think they talked about things that were very important. And I was screaming and clapping about some things I was like, not so much. But that's about the conversation. That's about the dialogue. And that's why it's important to have it, because we're not always going to agree, but I might learn something from what you're saying, even if I don't agree with you.